All right.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I am the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I am thrilled to be here with on-air reporter, weather meteorologist Pamela Gardner from NBC10 and NECN. So I'm going to get to Pamela in just a second. Oh, so you can say hello.
Hi there.
But before we actually get into our Q&A, I wanted to say thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. And I would also like to thank Pamela because she allowed us to partner with other libraries in the region. And so 17 actually stepped up and said, we want to be part of this. So I'm just going to quickly welcome the patrons from Acton, Arlington, Bedford, Belmont, Billerica, Boxborough, Boxford, Carlisle, Hanover, Maynard, Nashua, Newton, Quincy, Spencer, Tewksbury, Wareham, and Woburn. I did not grow up here, so I'm pretty sure I said some of those wrong.
You were pretty close for most of them.
Oh, really? Was it Woburn? Yeah, I always got Woburn wrong.
Woburn, yeah, Woburn.
Okay, all right.
I'm not from here either, so.
Oh, that's right. So welcome from wherever you are. Anyways, I want to turn this over to Pamela to tell us about yourself. I was going to do an intro, but I was just like, please just let us know everything there is to know about you, and then we'll get into a Q&A.
Everything? How much time do you have?
Well, I think you have to be back on air, so.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for joining. This is exciting with all the communities and libraries who are a part of this. And thank you to Mina for helping get this together and organize this. This is good. I just got off air and I was just saying how amazing technology has grown in the last few years that we could do this, because I would not have been able to drive to Ashland to be able to do this in the time frame that I had. So awesome stuff. And we're now national with someone from Arizona. So cool. Yep. So my name is Pamela Gardner. I've been on air for 14 years professionally, but my career journey began as a little kid. I used to be terrified of storms. I actually grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, in a suburb there. And it seemed like, my birthday being March 28th, every spring there would be severe weather. There'd be tornado warnings. And then we couldn't celebrate my birthday on my day because there were bad storms around. And I was so scared and nervous. I thought every storm produced a tornado because it happened so often. And then my mom said, you know what, why don't you go to the library, check out some books and read about thunderstorms and tornadoes and severe weather and learn about what they are. So I did, and I was hooked. I became fascinated. And really, I went to the weather section of our library in Lawrence, Indiana, and I would check out all the tornado books. And
so you're saying that you would attribute libraries to your current success?
Yes, I would. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just have to put that in there.
It was before we had internet at our house and stuff. So you had to go to the library, and there's nothing like flipping through the papers and the copy of these pictures of tornadoes and the research and the big textbooks. And I'm, in elementary school, I don't know what any of this stuff means yet. It doesn't make any sense, but I knew I wanted to learn more about it. So I did. And I eventually decided I wanted to go into meteorology. So I shadowed a meteorologist who was on television in Indianapolis. Kevin Gregory is his name. He's still on air today. And super nice guy. I ended up being a colleague of his in the same TV market later on. But with that experience of shadowing, it really helped to put me into the niche of, okay, I want to do broadcasting, communications, and meteorology together, definitely together. So what school do I go to? Well, I had to tour a few different schools. I toured Valparaiso University. I toured, Ball State University, wanted to stay in state because of storm chasing opportunities, and ended up going to Ball State University. Graduated in 4 years, and then I went on to Mississippi State University, and I ended up getting my first job right after my 4-year degree at Ball State, which was super lucky. I ended up going into telecommunications, minor in meteorology, because I wanted to have the background of reporting as well. And at Ball State, I did this immersive program where we had our own newscast run by students, and that was your course. So every day we worked our 8-hour day, instead of sitting in a classroom my senior year, I was actually out gathering news. I covered murders, I covered fires, I covered everything. And then I said, well, I want to do the extra step of being the weathercaster as well. And they said, great, you can do that. It was a lot. Many late days, lots of hard work. And then that was all on top of my meteorology courses, lots of math, lots of science, and we had group study, which helped get me through all the equations and the tough physics part of everything. And so that was a great 4 years at Ball State. Got my first job as a reporter, weekend weather anchor. I wasn't a meteorologist technically yet. And so I went to Terre Haute, Indiana, WTHI. I was there for about 2.5 years, was promoted after I got my Mississippi State certificate to become a meteorologist, because I had just had a few courses to finish up with. Went to mornings, and then I was promoted to a sister station, WTHI-TV in Indianapolis. And that was, I thought, my dream job. I made it. That's it. So I was weekends in Indianapolis, my hometown. Exciting. By the way, just to backtrack a little bit, in Terre Haute, I met my husband, who was a photographer. And so that's how, my family started here. So my husband went with me to Indianapolis, and he also worked at the same station. And then after about 3 years, we're both like, what's next? Let's go somewhere. Let's go somewhere else. Let's explore the country. In between, work, we would storm chase on the side. Wow. I dragged him with me out to a big storm complex out in Terre Haute, and there was lightning all around. It was incredible to see. So we've seen some stuff, storm chasing. But anyway, after Indianapolis, I interviewed at a couple stations, and then WBZ was where I ended up going to here in Boston. Yep, at BZ for 4 years, and then I moved over here to NBC10 Boston almost 5 years ago. 5 years, 5.5, something like that. So we've lived here almost 9 years in the Boston area, and we actually live on the South Shore. So we've really just embraced living in New England, and I love it. The weather is incredible. And while in New England, I have a baby on the way. We have our son, Julian, who's 2.5, almost 2.5. So, we've really grown our family here. So we feel like we're New Englanders now. And I had someone email me after NECN, after coverage of a nor'easter, and they're like, you're definitely a New Englander now. I'm like, yes. I used to do a lot of outdoor storm chasing with the big nor'easters at WBZ, especially. They had me out, my role was to be out in the storms. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I did. Here, it's a little bit just a different dynamic. So we have so many stations and on-air stuff to do that I'm more in-house nowadays, but there's always flexibility in that. What else? I got my seal of approval from the National Weather Association while here in New England, and then also won my first Emmy this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So I wanted to go back just a little bit. And for anybody listening in, please put your questions in the Q&A, but use the chat for chatter. Feel free to chat with each other and give each other hints and tips and things like that. Or if you've been storm chasing, but put your questions in the Q&A so I don't lose track of them. So I just want to go back a little bit to your college days and, learning about this. There's this impression that you really don't need that level of education to be a meteorologist. You sort of be able to point and read the teleprompter.
Sure.
Is that ever been the case? Ever?
It was a long time ago. It used to be the case where you didn't need necessarily all the meteorology courses, but over the years, and especially when I was just getting into college, it was from the start, you need those courses, even for television. Now, it was interesting because, you also have to learn how to communicate all of the complicated stuff of the math and science and bring it down to a conversation. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people are still learning to do. Even I'm still trying to learn how to explain different, my goodness. And so, I mean, explaining different teleconnections in a simple way that's quick and easy to figure out. Yeah, in college, I mean, I was told you need all those courses. Now, to get your seal, you need certain criteria of courses and classwork. And I would say now it's changed to where even news directors are looking at you. Okay, does this weather anchor or meteorologist have the background and the knowledge to do this job? But then they have to look at, do you have it all? Do you have this whole package of being able to explain? You could have as many degrees as you want in meteorology, but if you can't talk about it simply in 3 minutes, then you're not going to get the job.
That so makes sense to me because, well, I'll get back to that, but I wanted to ask about when you were in college and looking for jobs, were there other women, you know, in the same field as you? And did it seem like there was a rise in women meteorologists at the time, or has there been in the last maybe 5 or 7 years?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, we're talking 10, 15 years ago or so, coming out of college, getting into the first job. And in my class of everyone who was, it was a small group, believe it or not, who was doing the broadcast meteorologist thing. And of our handful of people that were doing it, I was the only one to get a job out of college on air. And there were probably 2 or 3 other women, and then the rest were men. And so it was hard. It was really hard. And a lot of times it was hard to get that first job and to be taken seriously as a scientist, because there was still that mental block of, well, you're a woman. I mean, it was wild. And some of these phone interviews that I did, because I applied to 60 different television stations across the country. I was willing to move anywhere and get paid nothing while moving who knows where. It just happened to be Terre Haute, which happened to be in my backyard, where I ended up getting my first job through a couple connections and the grace of God. But some of the phone interviews were just so condescending to who I was. Like, are you kidding me? You're asking me this stuff? And so I'm like, you know, I don't even want to work for you. In my mind, I'm like, all right, this is working out just fine. I know you're not a fit for me. So move on to the next. But yeah, it was really difficult, especially at that time. So 2009, the economy was terrible. There were a lot of layoffs in news too. So there was also the mentality of, if you can get a job, great, but you won't make it in TV. So I had one of those chips on my shoulders, like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to do something.
And you did. That's amazing. But the one thing that I notice in the news and meteorology especially is like, this seems like in a team of meteorologists on any station, the lead person is still a guy. And do you find that to be like sort of a glass barrier for the female meteorologists that you know?
Yeah, I think so. Now we have an exception, Cindy, over at Channel 5.
Yes. She's amazing.
Yes. So we're all, you know, we all know each other somewhat. We're so proud now that Cindy has broken that glass ceiling. Now I feel like the playing field is starting to level a little bit more. There's still kind of that you got to prove yourself mentality, but it's, you know, the opportunities are still there and they're getting better. So they're getting better. There's big strides. Still in research, we just there's a secret club of broadcast meteorologists. And we took a survey of all of us and said, okay, who are chiefs and what's your gender? Just to see the percentage. And I think the female chiefs across the nation, it was very low. It was like 10% or something are female chiefs, which is interesting. But I think it's getting better, because it used to be no way. It has to be a man. But yeah, now I feel like playing field's leveling off.
Well, I wondered if some of that was just because it had been so male heavy for so long, that those are the people that have risen because they've got the longevity.
Sure. And usually they've been in the business for decades and they're more recognizable. That's just how it is. So that I agree with that. If you've been there for 30 years, you deserve to be a chief. You know what you're doing. So depends who it is.
Yeah. If you know what you're doing, I think that's
yes. If you know what you're doing. Sure.
Okay. So I want to get into some of these questions because people are very interested, obviously, in the technology that you use and how it's changed over time, because you started off with the math, science, physics, and now you have like this all technology base. How do you keep up?
Yes, it's very difficult to keep up. There's so much information coming in all the time. But one of my favorite ways of keeping up, going to weather conferences, because that way I'm able to use what is usually a work day. I'm able to get out of the work mode for just a few days and join other meteorologists and climatologists in the field and social scientists too, to study the latest technology, the latest advances in forecasting, severe weather, National Weather Service, new things coming up. And that's something I enjoy doing too, some of the social side and studying why people react to warnings in a certain way. I was part of the group out in Oklahoma 5 years ago or so to do a facets program, which was to study how I would communicate as a broadcast meteorologist, the probability of a 40% chance of a tornado warning. But it's not a warning, it's a chance of a tornado. So this is a new thing that you might see over the next couple of years from the National Weather Service. But that's something I enjoy doing on the side as well, and keeping up with technology and people and emotions and how everything goes into play. But wow, there's so much to keep up with. Technology wise. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Technology wise.
More specifically, what we use every day, we use weather computers and graphic systems. So to forecast, everything that we use is online and available to anyone at home. If you're interested, send me an email. I would be more than happy to give you the email addresses. If you're young, a meteorologist in middle school, high school, and you want to know how can I forecast the weather myself, there's so many outlets out there that are free and easy to use. So I like to use pictures combined with some numbers to look at the forecast, right? And then I have to go on the computer and produce my graphics. I'm my own producer. I design my own graphics. Now I will say we have templates for our graphics and a certain look we have to follow, but overall we can get pretty creative. And I like to do augmented reality. That's something new as well.
I would love to talk about that a little bit more, but
yeah.
So when you're standing on the stage, like whatever, what is actually around you?
Oh yeah. So we have a lot of TV monitors, tons of lights overhead. It's very, very bright, and it's usually cold because everything has to be chilled with the technology. But nowadays the lighting is better, so it doesn't get overheated. What else do I have? So it depends on the studio. Sometimes I'm in front of a monitor and I can see my graphics behind me. Like today, I did the 11 o'clock news in the NBC studio, and I could see the graphics behind me. And then I'm looking at a camera of the programming, how I look in front of the graphics. I don't have a teleprompter. I don't read off of any script. It's all off the top of my head.
Wow.
For however long the producer's telling me to go. And then sometimes I do a forecast in front of a green screen, and that's when you probably may or may not have heard of it, where we have the chroma key. You can't wear the color green because you'll key out, you'll have the map on yourself. And then if you're in chroma, you have TV on this side, and you can see your maps when you look to the side, but you can't see it behind you.
Wow. So which is your preference?
I think my preference is chroma, only because I've done that for so many years. It's more of what I'm used to. Only since I came to Boston did I start forecasting in front of the monitors. And that's kind of weird because then I kind of have to turn my back to the camera, and I don't like doing that. Then I have to make sure the back of my hair looks good.
I'm sure you have people for that. So then when you're on the chroma and and you see it on the sides. How much practice does it take to actually be able to hit where you want to point to?
Yeah, it takes practice, and it takes coordination with the directors in the back. Oh, sorry. May have lost.
No, you're good.
It takes coordination with the directors in the back too, because there are certain shots for different people. I'm a little bit taller than our weekend meteorologist, and I'm not quite as tall as Matt Noyes in the morning. So I kind of have to be in the middle. And if they don't have your shot set up correctly, all of a sudden you pop up on camera, and then you may be in the right spot where you think you should be, and then you're not. So we've kind of gotten over the years. You can adjust. It's no big deal. But it takes a while. And that's something I learned in high school and in college. Practicing in front of the wall is what we would call it. That's exactly the time to do it. And during your internship too. That's how you get the experience and get comfortable before that first job.
So actually you mentioned Matt, and Joyce actually asked me in an email, what is is there a different role for the two of you? How is it similar or the same, or is it different?
It's different. So he's our chief meteorologist. He works the morning show on NBC, and then he does LX during the day. That's a typical day. Now, between vacations and holidays and rotating shifts, sometimes I step in to fill in just to keep our schedules consistent, to be honest. A lot of us have kind of been able to go into a role of, for example, Tevin and Pete are on the evenings. Tanya and I are more afternoons. Tanya's also on weekends. And then Matt and I are mornings. So if Matt needs to be off for some reason, or if there's an emergency, I can slide a couple hours early. No big deal. It's not like I'm working a night shift to a morning shift, which a lot of times you do in news. A lot. So, and I did it for years and years and years. So it's a very, very nice setup that we have here. We're very lucky to have enough people to be able to keep us normal with a normal schedule. Now I say normal. So Matt's schedule, he gets up at like 1:30 in the morning, and then I get up at 3:30, and then I kind of overlap. And that's also a result of severe weather, to make sure we're covered with at least two people at all times. So yeah, Matt does the mornings on NBC. I roll in to do a little tag team weather action. So I'll do a breakout on whatever I'm feeling that day, whether it be today I did a gardening forecast with augmented reality, or yesterday I did rainfall statistics. So I show up during the 6 a.m. and then take over for NECN, 7 to 9. And then I do the 11 on NBC, and then the noon cut-ins on NBC, depending on staffing.
My gosh, that sounds insane. And
it's a lot.
And you did say that your station is hiring a new meteorologist, because that's, even with the 6 of you, it's not enough.
Right. And we have Telemundo as well. So sometimes Tanya gets pulled to Telemundo because she's bilingual. And if Abby Mayal is off, she'll go to Telemundo. So yes. But we need a weekend night meteorologist. We are hiring at the moment. People move, people come and go. Justin was on, and he moved to Philadelphia. So that's why we have that opening.
So when you were during COVID, when you all were home, and you were actually broadcasting from home, right? Yes.
We each had our own home setup. Some of us had more intricate setups than others. I was very lucky. At the time, it was just before our son was born, our Julian. And so for that pregnancy, I was at home the whole time because there were so many surges of COVID that continued afterwards. So before he was born in May of 2021, they were like, just keep working from home. Hallelujah. That was very nice for pregnancy. My goodness. But I had a full setup at my house, full chroma key, which is the green screen in the back. I had iPads for monitors on the side, and a full camera, all in a little tiny bedroom. And I had to cover up the windows and everything. Now we don't have that bedroom because it's going to be this guy's room. So now I still have a setup for severe weather purposes, which I used on Sunday for the tornado warnings. and it's in my garage, which is in a flood zone during nor'easters.
Mhm.
Knock on wood. Yeah, it's in the garage and it's a full setup, and it's really humid down there right now.
Wow.
It's
I was
like
gonna
80
say,
degrees.
it seems like you're able to really pivot depending on what's going on in the
Yeah.
world as well as in the studio, which is amazing.
Mhm.
A lot of people are interested in, and Kathy asked the question, is global warming impacting the current computer forecasting model accuracy?
Oh, yes, definitely. It under forecasts sometimes the rainfall, and then other times it'll over forecast with the computer models. The system we had Sunday, it over forecast the rainfall as a result of how much precipitable water is in the atmosphere. The PWatt numbers, as you call them, they were off the charts of how much water was in the sky. And so the forecast models had like 5 to 10 inches of rain all across southern New England. We only ended up getting about 1 to 5 inches, which still caused major flood issues across the area and flash flood warnings, but it wasn't that 5 to 10. So yeah, climate change had something to do with that. I mean, there was something funky going on, forecast models. It's been weird because they can't pick up on it. We don't know how to come up with a way to fix it because it's always changing so much. So that's one recent example. That was a great question. Yeah.
Interesting. So Donnie wants to know, what is the process of getting your very basic weather information? Where do you go to get the basics?
Sure. I use several websites that are favorited on my computer. I go to College of DuPage, and it's their weather website. It's something I've used ever since college, and it's very quick and easy for me since I've used it for so long. College of DuPage, it's free, out of Illinois. And that you can get all types of information, satellite imagery, you can get forecast soundings where you can take a profile of the atmosphere and get in a particular point what the dew points are, how much CAPE is available for energy for thunderstorms, all in one spot. But usually I start with the GFS model, the NAM model, the RAP, the HR. There are several different forecast models that are all on there. And I look through the numbers, different levels of the atmosphere. I've gotten really quick at doing this. And then the precip. Okay, so where's the rain going to be? Okay, now let's go to temperatures, take some of the numbers down. And I kind of calculate in my mind what the middle numbers are going to be, because we've found over the years an ensemble forecast blend is best for accuracy. Yeah, so, but then again, some days due to forecast model bias on different events, sometimes we'll lean more towards the European models. Sometimes we'll lean towards, so it varies. But yes, that's one website. And then I have lots of others.
Is that one that if a layperson like me wanted to do it, it would be easy to understand?
Yeah, I think so. There's color coding, and then it shows the numbers of the temperature in certain communities. So you'd be able to see, okay, during the daytime, it's saying 80 some degrees. But if you notice, you use one forecast model, like the GFS, I think had 82 today for Boston, but we still went 85. So there's a little discrepancy. The Euro went a little hotter. So we, blended some of the numbers.
Yeah. Cause I found that, I try to sometimes look at AccuWeather, but there's so many ads on it. It's impossible to read. So
yes, AccuWeather is another one that I used to use, but yeah, now it's just, there's so many ads.
Pop-ups and stuff. It's terrible. Somebody asked, and I think this is hilarious. Winter, thrill or dread? I know you're I know you're a storm chaser, so yeah. I'm guessing thrill.
Actually, I dread the winter.
Really?
Yeah, because we know it's going to be long storms, long days, typically, although the last 2 winters have been nothing due to La Nina. That's really affected our winters. This year we have El Nino, so we're a little nervous. That could mean a more active winter this year. We'll see. But it makes me nervous specifically because we live in a coastal community. And so whenever we get a big storm, we get some flooding into our neighborhood. So that always just is in the back of my mind. But yeah.
Oh, well, good to know. I'm definitely gonna be checking you out this winter. So see if you're right or not. Jim asks that they've noticed that the weather reports on NECN are more generalized rather than being broken into like North, South, Midlands.
Yes.
Is there a reason for that? Because it's hard for like a lay person, I think, to know what their actual weather is.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's a result of no time. There's no time to get specific. And we used to try to do it. And I even tried doing the format of NECN right now for the stream, at least, is 2-minute weathers 3 times per half hour. So we have 6 weathers that we do. And I even tried at one point doing, okay, let's do the coast for 1. Let's do North Shore for 1. Let's do Central Mass for another. But then we excluded everyone else and people got upset. So it's a no-win situation. We try to get as specific and local as possible, but it's a regional station on NECN. So we have to make sure we're covering somehow, or at least showing on the map, Maine down through Rhode Island, through Western Mass, and through Cape Cod. I mean, all over. It's hard. And I'd love to get more specific, but
well, and I think that makes sense because some of us only have like 10 minutes in the morning to catch the weather before we head out for the day. And so we would want to have like sort of a bigger picture, but it can be a little bit frustrating to try to figure it out sometimes. It's good to know that you're doing the best you can.
Yeah, we get it. We totally get it. Yep.
So people have been asking about the storm chasing because, you know, we always wonder, why are you sent out in a hurricane and a flood and a tornado watch? So what protections do you have when you have to go out for work? I know for yourself, you know, you can just go out and do whatever you want.
Same protection for ourselves, though. We make sure, well, you got to know what you're doing first. Make sure you have an emergency backup, depending on where you are. So, most of my experience is out during snowstorms, during the nor'easters. So I'll just talk more about that for now. And during a nor'easter, I'm set up in a spot the day prior to it hitting so that I'm not traveling during the storm, or my crew isn't traveling during the storm. So we're already in a hotel, we're set up. One of the last storms I covered outside was in Plymouth, for example, and there was a big blizzard, Plymouth. There was thunder, snow, and everything. It was a big storm. And I was at the Plymouth Hotel the night before. We only had like a little 5-minute drive to our live location in the morning. But it ended up being so bad with the visibility, so windy that we could barely make it there in 30 minutes. It was ridiculous. And then when we got there, it was so wide in the open that we were like, okay, this isn't safe for me to stand out there. Like, I didn't mind going out and then coming back to a shelter. Like, hey, here's an example of the wind, and then getting back. Okay, so now we're safe. For TV purposes, you know, people want to see it, fine, whatever, but you got to be in a safe way. So goggles, helmets too. That's something that we use. And then the photographer is usually always blocked by the wind. So we knew it was a northeast wind. So we had to get a building that was positioned to where the photographer and even the car was behind the building. And then it appeared that I was out in it, but I wasn't. We also have to be cognizant of, because I prefer being at the coast, the wave heights and also the tide cycles to make sure you're not in a flood zone. So there are lots of science things that we have to forecast first and hope your forecast is on point before you're set out into a certain live location. And sometimes, frankly, I would say, hey, I can't be live because it's high tide and it's coming in faster. So you're not going to have me. And, you know, producers will get mad, but it's for our safety. So, but they get it. They get it. No power lines either. You got to make sure you're away from power lines, any debris that can fall, things like that. There's lots that go into account. Storm chasing in the Great Plains, though, or in the Midwest, that's a little bit different. You have to make sure you're in the right part of the storm, that you're not in the storm path of circulation if you're trying to chase a tornado, or in the hail core, or in the rain shaft, because then you can't see. And you have to make sure there are plenty of roads to get out of the way too. Yeah.
Wow.
It's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. And I don't do it as much anymore. Yeah.
I was going to ask, not just for yourself, because I would ask a male meteorologist as well, is that due to climate change or that you have your own families now, is it less likely for you to go out into those kind of storms for reporting?
I think it is now, just because of my certain role here at the station. It's changed. And I don't have that urge either. Some of us have that urge to be out in Mother Nature.
Mhm.
I don't have it so much anymore, probably because right at this moment I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
So my concern is my babies. Yeah. And then even my husband and I, we used to fly in a chopper at our station in Indianapolis. We would be it would be dangerous. We would go out in pretty strong winds and still go out and chopper and do breaking news on the camera. Then even then, over time, we're like, okay, not so risky anymore. Yeah, I don't know.
Is that because you knew more, like how much more dangerous it is?
Could be. Yeah, could be.
I don't
Could
know.
be our wiser age as we grew up a little bit. I had no fear growing up, and now, it's okay to be cautious. It's totally fine.
Well, weather has also changed so dramatically because of
Yes.
climate change that,
Yes.
as you said, some of it's not predictable.
Oh yeah, yeah. And some of it can go way to the extreme, where now in New England, we have tornado warnings all the time. We were talking about this off camera earlier. It's so frustrating because the technology is amazing and it's great, where we can see the mesocyclone. We can see the rotation inside a storm before it hits. Great. We can get a warning out 20 minutes before a possible tornado. But as we saw on Sunday, we had lots of warnings and only one tornado that actually occurred. But you always want to treat this situation that a tornado is on the ground and it's serious. You never want to treat it that, oh, it's not going to happen. Well, there's a warning because there's rotation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, that brings up something that we talked about before and is in the questions, is about people not believing what you're reporting because you've had so many warnings before, or, the last snowstorm was a nothing burger or whatever. How do you handle or manage that?
Yeah, our communication changes a little bit. Sometimes, especially after the winter. This winter was tough. I mean, it's always tough when you're talking about snow ratios. Oh, that's a whole nother conversation. But that's our job. That's our job. We come up with the snow map, right? And a lot of times we missed it this winter because of that rain snow line being just about 10 miles too far to the north. And so the next storm, we would be like, okay, so last storm wasn't where we wanted to be. It wasn't as accurate as we wanted to be. So what can we do differently to communicate these threats? Because they have changed. They're either more serious or not as serious. And so we would come up with different graphics. And I would say one graphic that stands out is something that we try to show the threats with like a bar graph, high, medium, low. Just break it down like that. Is it a low threat? And it depends who you talk to too, because I've been through a lot of nor'easters at this point now, that when I say nor'easter, that means business. I'm not saying just a typical little storm anymore. But when I came in first to New England, that was like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. But it wasn't like the blizzard of 78. So you have to have that scale because lots of people still remember that. And that's their benchmark. So we have to accommodate that as well. Yeah, it gets tricky, especially now that we're starting to get some stronger storms nowadays too. Right. 2018, we had big flooding. That was on record as, top 3 worst for coastal flooding. So I try to communicate that.
My phone's ringing. So yeah, that is tough for a person watching. And as I mentioned, for me, like I have to decide if the library is going to open or close. So it's very important for me to really be up to date with it. So I'm like glued to your forecasts when, we think it's going to snow. Yeah. Liz says, is there a weather condition or phenomenon that you still find the most fascinating or baffling?
Oh yes, tornadoes still. That's what I find most fascinating and most baffling, because Sunday on the radar, it looked like there was a tornado on the ground almost across parts of Acton and Concord, that location. And nothing was reported, no damage, nothing confirmed, but yet we had a storm cell that looked like nothing, didn't have a tornado warning on it from the National Weather Service. And that was the one that produced a little twister for 3 minutes on the ground. Like, what? We were all just, really? That's the tornado we got out of all of this? So it's fascinating. And here in New England, they form differently than out in the Midwest.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So here we can get a little brief spin up tornado when you have a very, very high shear or high twist in the atmosphere type of environment at the surface, and shallow thunderstorms and high dew points. We had that on Sunday. Midwest, you need all the ingredients. You need a towering cumulus thunderstorm, cumulonimbus cloud, and big thunderstorm with a huge meso in the storm, and then you get that tornado too. So here it's almost, you don't need as many ingredients to get a tornado. It's a very unique part of the country.
So where I live, a few years ago, we had a microburst, which was devastating, but it wasn't reported as like a tornado or like an event. So how do you decide on those levels?
Oh yeah. So microburst, we would say that would be a straight line wind damage event, but the microburst was it was in a circular pattern the way it was. And that's what happens when a storm releases its energy, its downdraft all at once, and the wind goes out in a circle. But it wasn't that twisting of a tornado that was occurring. So it was a different dynamic with that thunderstorm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cheryl Ann asks, what is LX?
Oh yeah, LX. So that's a certain network on our cable stations, and we support some of the programming on it. Honestly, I think it's going away soon. So they announced it. They announced the national that it's going away soon, but we do a lot of lifestyle stories. It airs on NECN several times a day with us on there. Matt is usually on there. And it's a way for us to focus on national weather because it broadcasts all across the nation.
We talked about that. So back, just a quick question about the severe weather. How many people are with you if you do get sent out?
Let's see, usually one other.
Oh, that's
usually
it.
One, just one. Yeah. Sometimes we get a producer, but not very often. Usually it's one person. He's the photographer, the lighting person. Usually I say he because, again, it's mostly males in the industry who go out. But we do have some female photographers now that we just hired here at NBC. So yeah, just one other person usually.
Sounds like a skeleton crew.
It is.
For people who are asking for Pamela's email, I will put it in a recap email to everybody afterwards. And I also put it in the chat a couple minutes ago. So Patricia asks, do you connect the dots when some of the severe weather patterns may be caused by climate change? And if so, do you ever get pushback from people who don't want to hear about it? In some parts of the country, meteorologists have been getting threats from the public because they don't believe in climate change.
Oh, yes. Yep. And I know who exactly you're referring to, actually. We talked about this at the weather conference about just how to communicate climate science along with meteorology, because I'm not a climate scientist. I'm a meteorologist. A lot of us you see on TV, our expertise is in local weather. Climatologically, yeah, we've had a couple courses on climate, but that's about it. And so now that we also incorporate some climate into our weathercasts, we don't do a lot, at least I don't do a lot of, oh, this storm happened because of climate change. And we've all agreed at our weather conference that you can't make that correlation that this happened because of climate change. Now, do we see more weird events going on? Do we see more warming? Yes. Do we see more flooding events? Yes. Is that linked? Yes. How? We don't know yet. We don't know exactly what's causing it, and we don't know how to stop it. And that's why we're all trying to figure out what was going on. Now, in a weathercast, typically you're not going to see us talk much about climate because we have 3 minutes to give you your local forecast and try to get in depth to things. So on occasion, I like to show Climate Central graphics because they do show sometimes the change of our dew points. There was a graphic that I was reading the other day that they sent to us, which is very helpful. our dew points are getting higher over the last 30 years, consistently higher. And our heat, same thing. And so they have the science, the statistics to back that stuff up. So on occasion, you'll see some of us sprinkling that stuff in if it's a quiet day.
But have you gotten any pushback for it in
I
Massachusetts?
have. Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. All the time. All the time. Not serious pushback where I would be concerned, but yes, there's always pushback. Yeah. But there's pushback too when I say it's going to storm on the weekend. So I don't mind. I don't mind the pushback.
Lois asks, is having multiple weather models helpful? Sometimes it seems like it's the more models you have, the more difficult it is to predict which is the most accurate.
Yeah, it is. It is more difficult. Nowadays, we even have our own NBC UFS, our own NBCU forecast system model that we run, which it takes a blend of everything and puts it together. But even that can stray you away from what actually happens. So yeah, it becomes more complicated with more technology that we have. It also takes more time to put a forecast together. I would love to have 4 hours just before my shift to read and figure out the numbers, the forecast, do the math. But getting up at 3:30 and being on air by 6, I can't do that. So the forecast, a lot of us forecast during the shift as we go on, as the day goes on. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that needs to shift dramatically, we'll change it in the middle of our shift too, as we get forecast model updates, because there are different model runs during the day too, and sometimes those even disagree. So yeah, it gets complicated.
Steve asks, when the weather forecast calls for a 60% chance of rain, for example, is it correct to interpret that to mean that when conditions were very similar in the past, 60% of the time it rained?
You're 60% likely to see rain in your location. So yeah, 40% chance that it's not going to rain.
Right. But does that 60%, does that come from past experience of knowing when it rained?
No, it doesn't communicate the past. It's just at this time, at this point in the day, you're going to have a 60% chance of rain, but it doesn't take into account the last time you had a 60% chance. I think is that what he's getting at? Like 60% of
like if it rained, if the conditions were similar, like yesterday,
yes.
Or like in the last week, and like 6 times it rained and 4 times it didn't, with similar conditions.
Not necessarily. No,
okay.
It's based on today's info. So yeah. So it may not rain. And that's the problem we've had these last several days. We've had a 60% chance that it's going to rain at any point, but yet lots of places haven't had any rain, but some have had too much rain and it's rained every day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm there.
I know.
I will ask Pamela for the weather websites that she's recommended. I know that there's the College of DuPage, and I will include those in my recap email as well.
Sure. Yeah. And Weather Bell is another one. That one you have to pay for. We have a station account. There are there's some info that you can get for free, but.
Right. Well, there was somebody mentioned windy.com and weather.gov.
Weather.gov. Oh, yes. Yes. And the Storm Prediction Center. That's another big one.
Okay. I'll put all of those in a recap. I'll email you afterwards, and I will email everybody here because we'd still have a few more questions. Is it particularly difficult to predict where and when flooding might occur? Because it seems like there's so many factors to that.
Yes and no. Yes, because it depends on where a storm is going to be, and we are not that good. We're hoping to be that good, but we're not that good to say, yes, you're going to get a storm at 2 o'clock in this community. Sometimes we say it, sometimes we are confident of it, but a lot of times we're not. And so it is hard. It's hard to forecast that. We know in a general area that if we're going to get a storm, and the storm that supports 1 to 2 inch rainfall rates an hour falls over parts of Vermont coming up in the next few days, it's going to probably cause flooding again. Mm-hmm. The ground is so saturated, just with what happened this last Monday. My goodness. There's so much water runoff too. The rivers are full. I mean, they're minor flood stage still in some spots south. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough, but we do use some of the knowledge of what's been happening recently to come up with who's going to see flooding.
So Mary Jo asked this question, which I think is great. Historically, how often does a meteorologist get into a bad situation and need rescue?
Oh, not too often. It
You would hear
happens.
about it, right? You would hear about it.
Yes, you would hear about it. You'd probably see video and pictures too of someone else taking video and pictures, but it doesn't happen too often. Yeah.
Okay.
And nowadays, and now a lot of TV stations are pulling back on sending people out live. At least the meteorologists. I know they still send reporters out still to do storm damage, but a lot of times they'll wait until after the storm to go out as well. So I think we're just, hopefully we're all getting smarter and safer. Yeah, I can't think of any situation.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, and I think this is awesome too. When I ask Alexa what the temperature in my town at the moment, where do they get that information? Where does it get that from?
It depends on your town and your location, because I live in a town where there is no weather sensor. And so it just gets interpolated, and it takes into account an average between the nearest cities that do have weather stations. So there's a network of weather spotters that have their own temperature sensors too, that feed into the National Weather Service, and that can help populate into some of those apps. Yeah, it's great to have the apps, and they're great for a quick look at, is there rain or not? But I just caution you with the apps, because the timing can be off, and sometimes the icons can be really off too, especially if there's a big weather event coming in, snow, or even a tropical storm nearby. It can really kind of make the algorithm wild, because there's no human on the backside to help adjust.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, who doesn't use weather apps? We all do. We all do. I use it for lightning awareness. That's a great thing. Our NBC weather app will set your location, know where you are at all times, and send you an alert if there's lightning detected in your area.
Ooh, that
So
is good.
it can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Scott asked a question, which I would like to the answer to as well as a librarian. Do public school superintendents ask you for info about whether they should cancel school for the day or not?
Yes, we get that a lot, and we don't say yes or no. We never do, because the forecast can always change, but we try to give as much guidance as possible and show them our weather maps and try to explain what it is. You can always, feel free to email us too if there are any principals, superintendents out there. Sometimes we do get emails ahead of time, and we'll always be happy to help guide you in the right direction, because it's tough. It's such a hard call. So hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a science, but it's not an exact science.
Yeah. I get it.
And Sally asked this really good question too. She was recently in Oregon and saw the weirdest cloud. It looked like a huge donut or spaceship. How does a cloud like that form, and does it indicate some kind of impending weather? It was spooky.
Oh, I'm guessing you're talking about a lenticular cloud. It looks like a big spaceship, and I bet you're near the mountains. Higher terrain areas sometimes can get it. So yeah, we can see that over the mountains here in New England too sometimes. And the lenticular clouds are just a result of that air rising over the mountain, and it just kind of gets stuck there in a little inversion, because there's some perhaps warmer air loft too, and so it stretches out into that lenticular shape. It's so cool. It's so photogenic to see something like that. That's neat.
Yeah, Sally said, I'm sure she took a couple of pictures. Do you have the freedom of presenting your own predictions, or do you have to confer as a team?
Both. We always have open communication as a team, because the team forecast is the best. It's the best way to go. But we do have the flexibility to come up with something if it changes. Like from morning to night, you'll see that, we have different numbers for some of the temperatures, and that's a result of new forecast guidance. And so you always want to be up to date and tweak it. Sometimes it's just a difference between two numbers though. So not a dramatic shift, but we always definitely make sure we have a team consensus on snow forecasts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
Because if you're inconsistent, we're going to get even more mad.
Yeah. And you're going to see different snow maps between all the stations.
Yes. So actually where we are about out of time. We have about 4 more minutes, but is that because you're regional, or is it like, is it just as different for the other stations because of the places that they are forecasting to?
The different stations, so we're unique because we have the regional NECN, and our snow map goes all the way to the Canadian border and through upstate New York, whereas theirs will kind of cut off in Western Mass sometimes, or even Vermont, New Hampshire, ski country. So yeah, that's one result right there. The other is just differing opinions. We're all scientists and we all have a different opinion. We're all human. We all have different opinions. And when you look at one thing and you put more weight towards snow growth versus, so-and-so put more weight on the temperatures, that's going to give you a dramatically different snow map. So we have a program called Teams, and at least within our department here, at our 4-station conglomerate, we consult with each other and leave notes and of what we're thinking with the forecast, and then we'll change it if we need to as a team.
Okay. One last question, and this is not related to the weather forecast as much, but about is there pressure for you as a woman in meteorology and forecasting and on air to present a certain persona? We were talking about this earlier about where, the clothing has changed so much, like if you look back at somebody was asking if you get compared to past people, meteorologists like Shelby Scott, like the look was just so completely different. Is that something coming from the station, or is that what is that?
Yeah, there's definitely a look, I guess. And it's weird. Early in my career, I was told you're too young. You look too young, you sound too young, you need to look older. Now I'm told you look too old, you sound too old. I'm like, what's going on? So, you're never where you should be. So what did my station do? They said, be yourself. And this is the first time in my career that I finally feel like myself. I can finally wear my hair with some curls. I have naturally wild curly hair. That's horrible in humidity. But they're like, who cares? We embrace it. So that's great. Now, people who are watching on TV, they still expect that look. They still, I think, expect someone who is put together, polished, almost fake, because I don't wear fake eyelashes in person, but that's the standard here. So you can see my eyes. I don't wear makeup usually at home, but you gotta wear makeup. You gotta be put together somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, you are on TV, but
yes, you gotta put your best foot forward.
It's kind of gone from like wearing like a nice suit where everybody, male and female, wear a nice suit, to where I was saying like all of the on-air women seem to be wearing like cocktail dresses. And how did that happen? And
I don't know. And I think it was a result of consultants coming in saying, let's be more fashionable. Let's be more relatable to people. People aren't wearing suits to work anymore. They're wearing this to work. Yeah, it's all a big experiment with what to wear.
I asked Susan the same thing. I interviewed Susan, and also from NBC and NECN a few months ago. And she said that during COVID, everything was relaxed. You guys could wear kind of whatever you wanted because you were home. Yes.
And it's still kind of relaxed too, because sometimes we're still from home. Now I just wear whatever I can fit in.
That's awesome. That is also a key thing to like dressing. So thank you, Pamela, so much. This has been a pleasure. And I look forward to getting you this video, because when you look back at it, you'll be like, it was great. We had a really good time. You answered so many questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. Thank you for your questions. I wish we had more time. This has been a blast. Thank you.
I know you got to get back to TV, but I do need that list of resources or websites. So if you could just send me a quick email, I'll send that out to everybody.
Yes, I can do that. I'll do that right now before I forget.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Pamela, have a wonderful day and a safe day.
Thank you. Same to you. Same to everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.